Welcome to Uxbridge Beat, the podcast where we feature the who's who of Uxbridge, Ontario. My name is Jennifer Neville-Campsell.
And I'm Scott Campsell. Today's guest is Regional Councillor Bruce Garrod. After a term as Ward 3 Councillor, Bruce has shifted his political gears.
Our Uxbridge Council has many moving parts that contribute to its functioning, and as Regional Councillor, many Uxbridge residents may not be too familiar with what Bruce's role is now.
Bruce was kind enough to spend some time and walk us through his job, as well as fielding questions from some of our listeners.
So let's find out what puts the beat into Bruce's political heart. Welcome, Bruce Garrod, to Uxbridge Beat. We're happy to have you today. Just give us a quick little intro on who you are and what you do.
Current job is the Regional Councillor here in Uxbridge.
And previous to that?
Previous to that, I was the Ward 3 Councillor for 4 years, starting in 2018.
And what motivated you into politics?
Why did I know that question was coming? I went into this for really two reasons, and I'll say the selfish one was to get to know more people and to do something entirely different. My entire career has been private sector, so I thought this would be something entirely different. You know, an event like this where I sit down with the two of you is a good example of things that have come from it because of taking that on. On the, I'll say the political side of thing, it was looking in and saying, I'm going to take some of that private sector experience, and if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, to bring it to council. So to be thinking of things. It's not a business. I get that. Running the township is not a business, but bringing that business thinking to the table. So that's what got me.
Why do you say it's not a business? Because I think a lot of people might disagree with you on that.
Yeah, it's a fair comment. People think, boy, you've got revenue coming in, it's taxes, and then you're spending it back out. So that part, I suppose you could say it's almost like a not-for-profit, but businesses are there to serve, but ultimately to make money. So the idea is to I'll say bring in more than you put out. So the idea would be to, whether that's for retained earnings for a small company or whether it's for shareholders, there's that side of it. There's still some business thinking, but it's certainly not a for-profit business by any stretch of the imagination.
As ward councillor, how do you think you were most effective in that time?
I really liked that first 4 years. That was where, the first time through would be knocking on the doors and getting to know people that way. And then I find what was really important was the little things that needed to get done. Great example of that would be four-way stops on Dominion Street. They'd been faced one direction one time, and then they got turned at 3rd Avenue and then changed again at 1st Avenue. And people didn't know where you should stop or where you shouldn't. And it was causing problems. So there are certain warrants or justifications that have to be met to get into four-way stops. And I just said, look, this just makes sense to get done. Another one was over on 4th Avenue where people have been upset for, a dozen years of people running through this intersection, and was able to get that one into a four-way stop. So it's kind of those small things that you can get done that people really do notice. The other part of our job, of course, is when you get onto certain committees. So I walked in and went straight into finance. And with finance, you're involved in everything and really wanting to look, if we go back to that business side, how do we get the most done with the money that we've got? We need more money, but not everybody's got lots of money, obviously. So how do we balance that need for taxation revenue with the demands for things we want to get done?
I think most of us would be ignorant as to what your job entails, whether it would be as a ward councillor or as a regional councillor. Timestamp your day for us.
Okay, so let's look at the current job, because I would think that a lot of people don't know what the regional councillor role was. I discovered that when I was going door to door in 2022. So many people said, we loved you as the Ward 3 councillor. We're sorry you're leaving. I went, leaving? I wouldn't do this job if I was going to be down at the region every week. If that was where, you go down there and you're doing regional work and you're not back in Uxbridge, I wouldn't have even applied for this job. I go down there to represent Uxbridge, but then I'm back in town, certainly here more than I am down there. So to walk through a day, there's no standard day whatsoever. It's not like it's 9 to 5. It certainly isn't. Often, I'll just talk about some of the regional things. So that I'd be down at the region. There's recurring meetings, I think pretty much every other Wednesday. We get assigned to or opt into a number of committees. So not surprising, I'm on the Finance and Admin Committee down there. I'm on the 911 Management Board. I'm on the Transit Executive. Some of it you get assigned to. the 911 management board, I'm kind of hijacking it here a little bit, but the 911 management board is kind of cool because I'm the only regional councillor. There's 28 of us, and I'm the only regional councillor that goes to these sessions. And it's kind of like a board of governance, if you will, for the 911 management board. But it's the raw data. I love data. So it's about how do you have the right structure in place to respond to 911 calls. Anyway, hijacked it again on you. The point being is that, 1 week I could be down at the region 7 times in a week. Or at conservation authorities. I'm on 2 of those. That fills up some of the days and some of the evenings. And then there'll be an entire week when I'm not down there at all, and I'm still on our local council, local committees, and things like that. So there's no standard day, that's for sure.
And your phone's never off, is it?
It's never off, but you know what? I don't get a whole lot of calls. And what we've done is really looked at it, and Mayor Barton and I are on the same page on this, is that we're like a board of directors, right? So, and I always liken it to if you've got a problem with your Rogers phone or your Bell Mobility phone, you don't call the board of directors when you've got a concern that the service isn't working, you have bad reception or something like that. There are channels to go through to take care of that. So I'll just talk about regional side. We've established 311. It's a fairly new service, but if your garbage didn't get picked up or you're concerned about a pothole on a regional road or there's some traffic light that's causing you grief, you call 311. You're not necessarily calling me or, in fairness, calling Dave as well. So it's on, it's right there beside me, but I don't expect it's going to go off on a Sunday afternoon. I listened to your podcast with Gary Lynn O'Connor, and I remember her saying years ago that I would be getting calls on a Saturday night and everything else. And I remember her joking, I don't think it was in your podcast, about a sewer backup and what was she going to do about it. If you call me on Saturday night, it might ring, but I might not answer. Like, it's really not a help desk kind of position that I'm in. I'm not going to say avoid a call per se, they call on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm probably answering, or will be answering that if I can. It's just setting the expectation that I don't see whether it's a ward councillor or a regional councillor or the mayor is a help desk. I don't see, we've got really qualified people both at the township and at the region who know how to get things done. If you call me and then I call my director level person or a commissioner level person at the region, it's going to take longer to filter down and then get back to me to get back to you. It'd be way easier if you took the right channel. I'm sure you'll find your issue addressed much quicker.
So talking about that, are there things that you can see that Dave's getting the heat for that it's actually your responsibility?
Well, yeah, there'll be things come up that, he and I spend so much time together. And I don't think there's many days that go by that we're not on the phone, either working on something or venting about something or planning carpooling down to the region, whatever it is that we're doing that particular time. And I tell him there are things, he's a regional representative as well. I mean, I'm the regional councillor, but he's certainly a big voice at the region. And I'll tell him, listen, that's my issue. A good example would be transit. We've got on-demand transit here. We've got the 905 bus that connects to the other towns. And then we've got the 605 bus that came online in January. If there's other concerns with that, and he'll start to get involved, because we all know Dave likes to jump in and get dirty and get involved with anything, I'll tell him not to. Dave, that's not your problem. That's mine. I'm on the transit executive committee with 5 or 6 other people. Send them my way. You don't have to solve everything, Dave.
Now, you and Dave didn't always get along.
That's a really good point. So when I was running in 2018, I had an opinion of Dave that wasn't entirely complimentary. And honestly, I had some input from other individuals, one of which ran against him in the election that I was listening to. And then Dave won and I won, and we weren't seeing things eye to eye. And I would say things were black because he said they were white, and we did not get along. It was not productive. It was unhealthy. It was stressful for both of us, for sure. And I've given him full marks for putting up with it. And then I came to realize that you might have thousands of people listening to this. I was wrong.
Oh, wait. Say it again, louder so your wife can hear it.
She hears me say I was wrong regularly. But in this case, my work wife, that would be Dave.
He's so pretty.
I'm going to say my wife's way prettier than Dave. I was wrong. I had some bad advice. I didn't give him time to settle into the position and have the authority that he has. He gave me time to understand the role better. And honestly, he's in a powerful position. He probably could have shut me out and kind of put me off into a corner while, get on with the business. And I think he just kind of let that take some time. And now I don't think the relationship could be any better. We spend so much time together. We collaborate on issues. He's very good at listening. He'll come up with an idea, and in private I'll say, Dave, it's not a great idea. Here's why I don't think so. And he'll either go, well, here's why it is, and give me some more information, and I go, okay, I get it. Or he might come around and go, you know what, I'm really glad that we had this conversation and we're not going to go down that path. So we spend so much time talking now.
What do you think needs improving on our council?
One thing, there's been some good changes. I'm glad in this last election where we had a guy like Zed Pickering come in, so that's bringing in a younger perspective. One thing that would be really helpful would be another woman on council. Women think differently than men, and if we had another woman on council, I think that would bring some more balance to it. I think we've got a pretty good mix of people who are very business and I'll say dollars and cents oriented, with people who are not so focused on dollars and cents and are looking at what needs to get done. Of course, what needs to get done or wants to be done has to match up with money eventually. So, we come together on that. But I think we've got a good diversity from that perspective. Also, another nice addition was Gord Shreve coming on, right? So here's a guy who's probably closer to my age than Zed's age, but he's bringing his faith to council as well. So that layers in another perspective as well. One thing I would add, if I can just throw in one more piece, would be somebody from the agricultural community. We're an agricultural township, and those men and women are so busy, especially in spring, summer, and fall. And I think that's why probably a lot of them wouldn't engage in this. And then by the time they perhaps retire, if they ever do retire, they're probably saying, yeah, but I don't think that's the job I want to do. But a member from the ag community Pam Beach is a farmer, and that's helpful as well. But to have somebody who's a second farming opinion would be useful too.
How much of our taxes go to region?
About 58% of your local property taxes would go there.
And is that pretty much equal across the region? Like, is Oshawa paying the same percentage?
No.
Okay.
No, so it is different by different municipalities. And think of it as a pie, right? So 15% of your property taxes go to pay for public education. No one's going to deny the importance of that. So that's committed. So 15% of the pie goes there. So now you've got the other 85% to divide between the region and locally here in the township. And, there'll be people who will say, well, we need to reduce that ratio and make it more coming here. Well, you could. That would come with a significant tax increase. So let's just make up a ridiculous number just by way of example. If local taxes went up 15%, I would be immediately out of a job and there'd be pickets in front of my house. But if it went up by 15%, suddenly that 85% of the pie I was talking about, now that piece would be much bigger, and then therefore the regional piece would be correspondingly smaller. Nobody wants to see that happen. So really our focus, Scott, is more about, of that 58% of residential property taxes that go to the region, how do we get as much of that back here in Uxbridge as we can, while continuing to support the good of a Durham region operations.
So with that in mind, you had given me a list when we were first touching base regarding today's episode, what the region provides in terms of services: waste management, water-related services, EMS, DRPS, health and social services, regional infrastructure, economic development, and tourism support and planning support. So you're on the 911 committee. Mm-hmm. One of the comments recurring, where we're talking about speeding and traffic, more police presence. How do we help that?
You're right. And as I was saying before, the biggest issue you hear if you go knocking on everybody's door is anger with drivers. And what really angers me, especially when I was the Ward 3 councillor, is most of the speeding in Barton Farms in particular our residents. You can't go into Barton Farms and come out anywhere else. You're not cutting through like you would be in the Coral Creek area and cut from one side of the town to the other. So everybody's speeding and Barton Farms lives there, which is really concerning, right? But what can we do as far as enforcing that and trying to slow people down and stop running stop signs, and whether it's over there in that part of town, anywhere in town around the concessions. And we've seen some of the things that happen when people run through stop signs on the concessions. So it's about continuing to meet with the police, and Dave and I do that regularly. The inspector who's in charge of North Division, there's a new one, a woman's just come on board. So we meet regularly with them to say, our crime here in the North is much, much different, thankfully, than it is in the South. We have a new chief of police, and I've talked to the guy, and he said, Bruce, you know what your biggest problem is up there? Impaired driving. With wide open roads and long stretches, impaired driving is wrong anywhere and can cause horrible situations wherever somebody was to do that. On a wide open stretch of road, it could be fatal. So they understand that our crime is different. We go down in the South and we talk about the impact of the really sensitive crime that'll happen, whether it's victim, children, spousal abuse, all of those horrible things and that are really upsetting. Not that we don't have that up here, but ours is more about traffic related. So when we meet with the inspector, we'll be talking to her and saying, listen, what we really need is visibility. It's not necessarily enforcement. Enforcement matters, but every one of us are going to slow down if you see a cop on Brock Street or Toronto Street. All they have to do is be there. And I've said, I don't even care if the person's sitting there and doing the work that needs to be done, just get the cops to be visible. Now, I just want to explain one thing. We always hear that how few cops there are in North Durham. And there's a misunderstanding that there's only 2 on the road at any given time. That's not true. There are 2 in each of the townships. So right now, while we're doing this, there would be 2 primarily in Scugog, 2 in Brock, and 2 here in Uxbridge. And the other part is people say, well, they're never here. And I always respond with, just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not here. They could be sitting on a concession in Goodwood right now. I don't know where they are or what they're doing. But what I do see is when something happens, they're all there very quickly. So whether if it's a serious crime that has happened or an unfortunate motor vehicle accident, they will come from everywhere and you'll see all kinds of them very quickly. And by all kinds of them, I mean, there'll be 6 very quickly, as fast as you can get from, it's a big area up here, but as fast as you can get here. And then we'll get them from the south as well. So they'll parachute in from Pickering and Ajax as needed as well.
You're still going to have people say it's not enough. You're not doing enough.
100%.
Yeah.
If we could have more, there'll be some people say we should have our own police force. Well, the cost associated with that, you think of what you would need to have 2 men or women, 724 in town. That would be at least 7 or 8 officers, plus the vehicles and all those type of things. And then that would just be for standard visibility around town. That would not equip you for, the serious crime where you need the heavy equipment or a helicopter or they've got built a vehicle that's almost like a tank that they bring in horrible situations. So we can always do more and we're always pushing to get more. But the reality is we represent 2% of Durham Region's population. And we work really hard on making sure that those 2 officers are as available or as visible rather as we can make them. But at the same time, if something happens in Scugog while we're doing this and they happen to be on, anywhere in Uxbridge, but if they're in the urban area and something was to happen over in Port Perry, they'd be on their way over there too.
So how would somebody get attention from the police? So I mean, good attention. I know I can get bad attention, but like for example, like Cemetery Road here, it seems to be a lot of speeders in the morning. They're all trying. So how would we go about saying, okay,
is that a 311 call on our part?
No, the best you could, but I wouldn't go 311 on that. What I would do would be call the non-emergency number. Don't call 911, but call the non-emergency number. And they have a traffic analyst who studies, where events are happening, but also the complaints that come from residents. And their job is to say, well, where's the most effective place to deploy somebody? So if you've got speeding on Cemetery Road, you should be calling and saying, every day between 6 a.m. and 7:30, people are speeding right down that road. And you think, okay, well, I did that, but I still don't see them. But that's one call. If your neighbors called, or neighbors on Cemetery Road, or you called again tomorrow, and then, you can't do it every day. I get it. You're busy individuals running your lives, but call when it happens. And suddenly on that data analyst sheet is 17 calls about speeding on Cemetery Road between 6 and 7:30 in the morning. I would bet you that ends up resulting in a cop being on the road.
That's great information to know.
So it's not like we should sit in our car with our hairdryer and just act like we're...
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
don't do that.
Oh, come on.
It would be fun.
You're
Don't do
such a
it.
party pooper, Bruce. Let's look at the downtown core.
Okay.
We got some issues. How are we progressing? Where are we at?
So the downtown revitalization plan is a key project. One of our biggest. I'm sure we'll talk about some of the other big projects in town, but downtown revitalization is a passion for many members on council. Councillor Pop, it's his baby for sure. I mean, that's probably his single biggest focus. A consultation with the community was done, got all kinds of input on what people think it should be. I forget the number, but I think it was like 1,200 people or something provided input of, I'd like to see this, or I don't want to see that. And if you haven't seen the result of that, the plan of people then taking that input and creating visuals on what it could look like, it's available on the website. It's beautiful. Now we just need people to do it. Now, that's way easier said than done in that the township's not going to build. You don't want to take your tax dollars and find that we're building stores. That's not the business that we're in. But what we can do is make it appealing for investment to happen. So we've set the table, without going too technical, we've done this thing called C3 zoning. So C3 zoning allows for and does not allow for certain things to be downtown. It allows for mixed use building with commercial on the bottom and residential on top. It does not allow for strip joints, right? So you're not going to get that. You can't say any business is a good business. Maybe not. So
Told you.
I was just looking for another way to make some money. That's all.
I love the look. Told you. So the fire hall could have had a whole different use, couldn't it?
Where's that calendar?
That's a big pull.
The chafing.
Oh, this is going down.
Oh, goodness. We digress. Moving on. C3.
So, that zoning is in place. So, now what do? So we've met with developers to talk, to show them the plan and to say what we want to do and encourage them to come to town and develop. We've got the new building going in, the horrible situation where Trinity got wiped out, but they've always planned on developing the property behind it on Main Street. And that's now going forward. Kindred Works has come forward with a proposal to 6th-floor buildings. That's going to bring much needed rental accommodations to town. But it's right there at the corner of Main and Brock, basically. And imagine the foot traffic that will come with that. When I talk to local business owners, and you had Don on here to do the podcast with him, he loves the idea of growth downtown where people then just walk around the corner and come to the restaurant. Our businesses need more foot traffic. And you can just see the chicken and egg start to happen. I guess the chicken in this point is the new building gets built. The egg will be, you've got all the people coming in, walking around downtown, which will then lead to another business opening, which then brings more people in, and then it'll start to go.
Going back to the 6th-floor building, there's not necessarily all positive reaction to that. What are your personal thoughts on a 6th-floor building downtown?
So I'm going to go back first to when we were proposing the 6th-floor building, or we were proposing, a developer came to town saying, let's put a 6th-floor building at the corner of Harriman and Brock. And a number of people lost their minds saying, that's just not Uxbridge and we shouldn't have that. And the reality is we need some of that kind of accommodations. And if you think of whether it's that, or if I go back to your question, Jennifer, about the 6th-floor buildings, that gives a chance for two different demographics to move in. You could have a younger demographic move in, they're not ready to buy or don't even want to buy, and they can go into these apartment buildings. And the same thing on the other end of that demographic would be a senior person who doesn't want to be in their home anymore. They just want to have a comfortable apartment to be in. So whether or not it's the 6th-floor building or the 4th-floor building, there will be a different demographic come. The part I like about a senior having that opportunity is they get to stay in Uxbridge. They get to have a self-contained unit that they're very comfortable in. and they've moved out of their house. So picture somebody who they're now moving out of a home in Testa or a home on First Avenue or wherever they are. Now they move out, they get the kind of accommodations that they want, and now there's a house for sale that somebody else can move into. Sure, it's going to be different, but a developer's not going to come to town and say, well, here, let me build a 2-story building. The financials just don't work. With a 4-floor and even the 6-floor building, the number of units that will go in there, it's going to bring densification of the foot traffic we talked about, and it also provides much needed alternative accommodations that we just don't have right now.
Hey Uxbridge, when I first opened Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness in September of 1999, we only had a small dojo with tiny change rooms, and we only offered karate classes. We now have a 3,000 square foot training facility, and that's not including our spacious change rooms with showers inside Body Fit Health Club. We still offer karate, but we also offer classes in Aikido, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and weapons including Japanese sword. We also have great fitness classes that'll keep you motivated to take your training to the next level. As much as I'm proud of these accomplishments, our biggest success is in our programs for children. We're not just happy with kids winning medals, we want them to win at life. That means increasing their focus, self-discipline, self-confidence, and self-esteem, and not just their self-defense skills. We haven't slowed down in our almost 25 years of operation. We've gotten bigger, better, and we're just getting started. Now is the time for you and your family to get started along with us. Contact us today at Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness at okamikai.com.
Along the lines of expansion, we put the question out to the Uxbridge Beat Facebook group. And Cliff wants to know, when might we hear from the region about the future expansion of the sewer plant in Uxbridge?
That's a great question. So this summer, there will be some maintenance happening on that water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, that people are going to think, here it is, it's finally happening, they're going to double the capacity, and Uxbridge is going to have sudden growth. Let's dispel that myth right now. Every facility needs ongoing maintenance, and wastewater management is a pretty important one that we don't want to have it fail sometime, and the problems that would come with that. So this is routine maintenance in order to make sure that it continues to function at the existing and potentially marginal increased capacity. By marginal, I mean maybe a couple hundred units or something like that. Not enough to say we're going to build 1,700 units somewhere else in town. That's not what the intent of this is. There are no plans by Durham Region to expand the capacity of that plant. Even if they did, and there are no plans to do so, part of the issue is the amount of water that has to come into, so we've got fresh water here, but to process the output that comes with a wastewater management plant. So then the phosphorus that goes out has to be diluted, for lack of a better term, before it makes its way up through Uxbridge Creek and eventually up to Lake Simcoe. That's water level dependent. You could continue to have more phosphorus going out, but that's not acceptable to the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. You need more water. It's like putting sugar in a glass of water, if you would, but then you would need a certain amount of water to keep it diluted. If you put more sugar in, you need more water. You can't make water. There's no additional water here. So even if they were to consider, they being the region, considered a multi-million-dollar expansion of the wastewater management plant, that's not going to solve the problem. I don't see significant wastewater management capacity growth in this town in many years.
And how does that speak to the land development then?
Well, that's exactly it. So right now we're probably, I'm going to say we're the lowest growth, certainly in the GTA, if not the GTHA. From a household growth perspective. There was a report to council that talked about what the growth had been in the past and then again what it is now. And then it projects into the future. The region has done some forecasting, and in the foreseeable future, we're going to be exactly what we are now, which is about under 1%.
It's interesting because if you were just to drive through town and you haven't been here, let's say for a couple of years, you'd go, oh my gosh, there's so much expansion, all the new homes out by the high school and, just more and more stuff. But that's still part of the less than 1%?
Absolutely. So in rough numbers, there were 70 homes built on the north side of Brock, about the same on the south side, and give or take close to the same amount on Reach Street across the road from the golf course. That's a lot of growth all of a sudden, because all three have come online at pretty close to the same period. And it feels like there's a bunch of growth, but where else? There's been a little bit on Elgin Park Drive with the development that went in there. There's certainly some infill housing, and we're big supporters of infill housing. So if someone's got a big property and they're able to get the zoning to do it, you can build homes like you've seen on Cemetery Road. That will continue to happen. But as for big growth, there's no Coral Creeks, Barton Farms, Quaker Villages in the pipeline. People will be saying, as they're listening to this, going, that's not true. There's one proposed north of Quaker Village. And that's absolutely true, that the developer has come in. We resisted it. They went to the Ontario Land Tribunal. They got approved to do it. This has all happened in early 2024, and it doesn't mean a thing because we control the wastewater management. And frankly, there isn't any. If there was, then that would be going ahead, but there's no fear. I've even checked the province is going to take over control of the wastewater management. That's not something they would want to do across all the communities in Ontario. So while they've got approval for a pretty big subdivision north of Bolton Drive, there is no expectation that's going to be built anytime soon.
So how do you balance it? Like, this is one thing that keeps on coming up when we have people that are involved in politics on the podcast is, how do you take, we don't want the town to grow, but at the same time, we've got people that are saying that who have kids that can't buy houses in town, that they've lived here all their lives and all they want to do is just stay in Uxbridge. And so now there's no growth. So there's no houses for them to live in. So now your prices of your houses have gone up. You've got small business owners that are looking for more people so they get more customers. There needs to be growth, but at the same time, we don't want growth. So how do we balance it?
Completely agree. My kid's one of those. I've got a 30-year-old son, married, granddaughter, and dying to come back to Uxbridge. And they live north of Finland Falls right now. They want to live here. And they can't find a place, or when they find a place, it's beyond their budget. Uxbridge is an expensive place to buy real estate for sure. I'm going to say there's two things. One is there won't be any sudden growth, as I've said. So there's not going to be a magic pill where all of a sudden there's another Quaker Village or Coral Creek coming online. But as I was talking about with the apartment buildings coming in, when you've got that many people now able to stay in Uxbridge, because seniors are as interested, I shouldn't even say seniors, as people age, they want different types of housing, but they don't want to leave, and people want to come in, they want their house, but now they can go into an alternative type of accommodation where that does free up some capacity to buy. People don't want to have the 4-floor building over in Harriman. Some people don't want the 6-floor building, but it creates housing both for people that can't afford to buy but can now rent and get the joy of living in Uxbridge, but also allows for people to move to alternative types of housing.
Amy would like to know, is there any inside info or further info on the provincial park, and what are the survey results?
Okay. I love this. This is like live questions coming in. This is great. So that park it's a provincial initiative. Mayor Barton brought that to the province for sure. He started the process, and it goes all the way back to the Gan Eden lands when there's a land swap with the province. All of those things that happened about when we were moving here in the late 90s. The latest on that is that there are regular, and I mean regular as in weekly meetings with the province about moving that forward. And there's no firm commitment to when it's going to open or exactly what it's going to be, but it's the fastest moving provincial park ever being built in Ontario. So it's moving forward. It's not like an Algonquin Park where it's a massive piece of land that's all in one big chunk. This is going to be, picture Kitty Corner from over here on Old Stillwell Road going down to Durham Forest, south of Goodwood Road, and then also going southwest towards the Rouge. And how do you get there? If the plan goes as expected, they'll integrate in some Toronto Conservation Authority lands, some Lake Simcoe lands, perhaps some Township of Uxbridge lands, and even that doesn't give you a congruent line all the way through, so there's private properties going in. So people that, generous people donate their lands strategically so that we can stitch those pieces together. And then we've also got people who are prepared to sell. They might have 20 acres and they say, well, I'll sell you an easement through just to be able to connect you through. So that's how that's going to come together. When will it happen? The province is motivated on this. They would like to make that first announcement in 24. I don't know if it'll happen that quickly, but it's not one of these ones, well, yeah, we'll do it, but it'll be in 2030 something. It'll happen much sooner than that.
Randy would like to know more about the construction happening at the hospital and when it starts and a hopeful completion date.
Now you're going to get me all fired up. There is no project more important to the Township of Uxbridge than that new hospital and the long-term care home. Full stop. We are completely committed to moving that forward. We've got an outstanding relationship with a lady named Ellen Pacheco. She's the Chief Operating Officer of Oak Valley Health. They are on a mission to build that hospital. So not only do they recognize that we need it here to serve our community, it's going to be a little bit bigger, it's going to be 35 beds. They need it, they being Oak Valley Health, because it's going to be a chance for them to offload some people from the Markham Hospital. So they'll be able to bring people here. It's more beds, right? It's more beds into the system. So she is very driven and is committed to her plan. And I think this is going to happen. The shovels could go in the ground in 2024. Right next door to that, as part of the same campus, is my absolute passion project, is the long-term care home. So I've been involved in that years before I was ever elected. It was one of my drivers. You'd asked about what got me into this. Well, I've got a pretty loud voice, even not elected, but I've got an amplified voice as an elected person. So I'm working more closely on getting that done. I'm super close to every issue that's happening with getting that built. And the plan now is a 192 bed facility, which is massive. Reachview in comparison is 100 beds, currently operating at 65 beds or so after COVID. And think of a brand new 192 bed facility physically attached to the hospital, which is physically attached to the docks building that's already in place. So it's interesting. What I love about this is, I told you I could get fired up and I'll be talking about this one all day. Mike McDonald started this process about the need for a new long-term care home. He and I first engaged in this probably 10, 11 years ago. And then one of the things we did is we talked about the idea of a campus of care. So I drove up to Perry Sound and looked at theirs, where their hospital is attached to their long-term care home. Came back here, Minister Bethlen Falvey was and still is our MPP, very much efficiency driven. And we talked to him about the benefits of co-located facilities. So you've got anything from kitchens, like a single commercial kitchen that would serve both, loading docks, IT infrastructure, things like that you need long-term care, you need a hospital, you put them together, you can do both better from a healthcare perspective, but also financially, you can do it better. So we pushed that approach. Recently, the province has announced this new model that they plan to continue with any of their long-term care and hospital beds, that they expect them to be co-located. I love it when an idea that we've been pushing for years, and I'm not being sarcastic here, I love it that they've taken this on and they're now going to, there's a name that they have for it, and it's now their idea. Perfect. Because now they're pushing for what we've been pushing for a very long time. This project's going to get going in 24 is my crystal ball.
So it's awkward to say it, but I'm trying to ask, how well do you get along with the provincial government? But I know that if you get backed into that corner and you don't get along with them, then now you're shooting yourself in the foot. So let's say, where are areas that you think you're doing really well with the provincial government, and where are areas that you think you could do better?
So it's a safe question, because we've got a fantastic relationship both with Minister Bethlen Falvey and with this provincial government. And the primary guy that's made that happen is a guy named Mayor Dave Barton. He is such a relationship builder. And we were just at a conference early in 2024 at the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association, called ROMA, where all the rural communities come together, ironically, in downtown Toronto, and we're all there together. And any community can apply to meet with the various ministries, and then they decide who they're going to meet with. We were fortunate that they took 4 of our requests, so Minister of Health, Minister of Long-Term Care, Minister of Environment, Minister of Parks. We met with all 4 of those, and we're sitting like your table, sitting right across and having conversations with them about provincial issues that matter to Uxbridge. So we have a fantastic relationship with them. What can we do better, Scott, would be they reassign people, right? They have a cabinet shuffle, and I'm not sure if it's we need to do better, but we have to be ready to adjust. So Minister Pacini was responsible, and he was out here when we were doing the urban park. He's now got a different responsibility. A new minister comes in, and we have to build that relationship very quickly. But again, when a guy like Dave walks in and meets a minister, and we were at one of these conventions last year, and this minister got up, came around the table and said, "My favorite mayor," and gave him a hug. That tells you the kind of relationship that this guy can develop. So I'm just happy to be at the table when he's doing that kind of stuff.
There are a lot of keyboard warriors in town, probably like there are in any town. What can we as community members do better to help our council, to help our community, to solve the problems that we love to passionately write about on Facebook?
It's a great way to put it. So I love the passion. There's a couple of Facebook pages that if you want to know what's going on, just log on and take a look in there. And it's fine if it's a vent, but when you start to provide your insights, of which you don't actually have any, and you're saying, I know for sure this is what's happening, and those of us on council are reading and go, that's actually not what's going on. It's not productive, right? And often, and I know you've talked about Dave going on there, and I'm doing a little bit more of it now, the idea of meet them where they are. So we'll respond to it, but we can't get into a conflict on social media. Right? I was coached during the last election, do not get into an argument on social media because you can't win, even if you're right and you're winning. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win. So it's fine that they're there, but the idea of you're saying, Jennifer, what can they do? Let's go back to the policing issue. If you're really upset about a lack of police, and insert your street name here, then going on Facebook is that data analyst or traffic analyst is not connecting, right? They're going to do they're acting on data. So contact them. It's okay to go onto Facebook and say, I'm really upset. There's people speeding. I just had one today where somebody reached out. She was concerned about speeding on Elgin Park Drive. She wrote to the police, copied me. I noticed that where she sent it to probably wasn't the best choice, so I got a hold of her and said, this is where you should go. And by the way, do it, as we talked about before, do it regularly and get other people to do it as well. So long answer, typically I am, but is be able to say, what can you do? Sure, vent if you want on local social media. But if you want action, go after the people that are responsible for the thing you're upset about. Knocking over automatic speed enforcement cameras at the same time as people are complaining about speeding on Brock and Reach Street, that's disheartening, right? You need to be able to say these things work. If you don't like them, okay, but temper your actions that are associated with that.
Before we get into rapid fire, is there anything else that you want to talk about in Uxbridge?
I'm working really hard to make sure people understand what this role is, what the regional councillor role. And I'm thrilled that you gave me this opportunity to, one more channel to get to people to say, what is the role? I think for too long, people didn't even know what it was. And I experienced that when I was knocking on doors. I think people need to understand, Scott, you asked about the 58% of your taxes that go there. That's a lot of money. That's $3, $4, $5 or more $1,000 that you're sending to the region. People need to know where that's going, and you're contributing to things you may not take advantage of. And by that, I mean social services. I've written articles in the local paper about social services, and maybe it's a kind of a rude comment, but the less you know about it, the better your life is. So if you don't know about where those social services are and so on, and the help that's out there, that's because, many of us lead a pretty blessed life. So for people to understand what's available to them, whether it's a family member that needs some social help, or whether it's where to contact for garbage pickup, recycling programs, all of those type of things, take the time to understand, rather than be angry, take the time to understand of what the role is of the region and how you can help me make good decisions on where that investment should be coming back into town.
Okay, we're going to do a rapid fire.
Love it.
This first one is a bit touchy because Patrick the cat is sitting right here on my lap for the whole interview. So I'm just going to cover his ears.
Cover his ears.
Dogs or cats?
Sorry, kitty, dogs.
I knew you were going to say that. I love you, Patrick. Winter or summer?
Summer.
Your favorite restaurant in town?
That's a tough one, especially in this job. The one that my wife chooses.
Nice. Nice.
Okay, fine. But who makes the best burger?
I'm a fan of the one at B&L. I like it there. There's other good ones. If I want a real treat for a burger, I'd probably go to Urban Pantry.
What's the best part of your job right now?
The fact that I'm able to work on I'm going to call them macro issues, things that are going to affect the lives of Uxbridge residents in the short term, but especially in the longer term.
What's the worst part of your job?
When people get all fired up, as they have this past weekend, where you get 10 emails from one person using rather inappropriate language about my job, the provincial job, and the federal representative's job.
If you could speak to one person who is alive today that you'd like to spend some time with, who would that be?
I would love to get in the head of some senior politicians in different countries to really ask, what are you doing? And even in our own country, what really drives Justin Trudeau to make the decisions he makes? But we're a small part of the world. Geographically, we're not, but population-wise. Even with Trump, would you like to sit with him and go, what? What are you talking about? Or, the ongoing and never-ending crisis in the Mideast. How do you bring a resolution to that without killing so many people? I would love to have those discussions.
Is there anybody that inspires you as a leader that you want to emulate, or that, what we're saying, you talk to people as to how they think the way they're thinking, but is there anybody where you just would rather get advice from?
Okay, this is going to sound way too suck up, but, Barton's pretty good. I've learned a lot in the 6 years I've been on council. I've learned a lot about relationship management and what to say, and when you vote certain ways, even if you might be feeling differently. Beyond that, from an international leader perspective, you think of some of the huge figures, like the leadership and following that somebody like the Pope would have. I'm not Catholic, but I certainly respect people that are in awe of that gentleman. Talking to somebody like that would actually say, calm down and look bigger, would be really helpful.
If you could speak to one person who's passed away and have one more conversation with them, who would it be?
Okay, get the tears out of my eyes. I know you always hear, so many of your people that have participated have said their mom. Yeah. Certainly I would love to have another conversation with my mom and dad, in that you don't listen when you have the opportunity. And man, I wish I'd asked some more questions and really listened to that. But also think of, if I can go beyond the one, which I've now made two, wouldn't it be cool if you could talk to a Winston Churchill? Those people that were dealing with Roosevelt when tyranny was on the edge of taking over the entire planet, and these two stood up and said, not on my watch. How did they do that? Wow, that would be a cool conversation.
Greatest accomplishment, whether it be politically or personally?
Oh, my family, 100%. I've been married to Robin since 1985. We've got 2 kids. Both are successful in their own way. One's married and has brought us our first grandchild and moving here. The other one's getting married this fall to a great guy. Pretty proud of that accomplishment. I love being a husband and a dad.
Biggest regret?
You know what? I like this politics stuff. The funny part is I left the private sector. I'd worked my way up at certain levels of management at Bell, and thought, I don't like the politics of going any higher. Yet now here I am in this job, learning so much about it. There's a time and a place for everything. I left Bell, did my independent thing for another 10, 15, 20 years, and then got into this. Had a do-over, I would probably look to get elected 4 years sooner. So instead of 2018, 2014, and then I'd be really even more in my stride than I am right now.
When you die, what do you hope that God says to you?
You did okay, kid. Looks at me and says, you certainly weren't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you did okay as a husband, you did okay as a dad, and generally speaking, you served the broad community in a decent way.
Are you done? Are you done, like, with politics when this term is done?
I get asked almost every week if I want Dave's job. If that interests me or not. And it's too soon. We're only into the second year of this. I don't know where that's going to go. I'd like to see Dave stay in that job for another term. And then if that's the case, I don't want to work until I'm dead, but I like this job. If the election was right now, if it was coming up in 2024 or 2025, I would run for sure. Next one's not till 26. I would like to do this job again for another 4 years, I think. I'm hesitant to commit to what that's going to look like. But, we've got a growing family happening now through grandchild. Love it if there was another one. My daughter getting married. Maybe that'll lead to children. That's kind of cool and exciting. And, health matters, right? As you get older, stuff starts to happen. Again, I don't want to work until I'm sick or get forced out. But I'm having a good time, and I would drive my wife nuts if I was home every day, all day. So I've got to do something.
Better to drive Dave nuts.
Yeah, it's more fun to drive my work wife. Drive him nuts instead.
I can totally understand that. Every time I see him, I want to drive him nuts. So that's great.
He's good for that.
Well, you didn't drive us nuts. Thank you for spending the time with us. I'm glad we gave your wife an hour of respite with getting you out of the house. So thank you for spending the time with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for that opportunity. And thanks for the two of you for continuing to do this. It's a pretty cool experience to get on the same list as a Dave Barton, Garrod O'Connor, Pat Higgins, Don Andrews, to be part of that. But this matters, I think. So thanks for doing this and just continuing to give people a chance to get to know more than the face that they see at the store or on council.
Interesting takeaway from that interview. People are complaining about speeding in town and that drivers are driving recklessly. And yet it's the residents of the town that are upset about the people that are driving recklessly. If there's a police officer with a radar gun, is anybody going to balk over that compared to the camera that gets knocked over by the residents of the town?
I think we can balk to the police officer. That's the issue, right? That we want the human element of a police officer there to slow everybody down, to slow other people down. And for us, if we're the ones that get caught, then we can plead our case. With a camera, you don't have the opportunity to plead your case. And I don't know about you, but I think you've been dinged with a speeding camera, right? I have. I know for sure that I have. I got a nice ticket in the mail from the one down in Goodwood.
It wasn't in town.
No, but
I want everybody to know it wasn't in town. It was in Newmarket.
Yours was in Newmarket.
Yeah.
Mine was in Goodwood.
I'm not speeding in my own hometown.
I definitely slow down in Goodwood now. The point is that what's the quantifiable number? So in other words, when we learn how to drive, we're told that if you get caught doing 15 over, and it's not even that we're told, this is part of the law. If you are speeding up to 15 kilometers over, there is a monetary fine, but there are no points. 16 over, well, now we have points. So what is it with the camera? Where's the line? Is it one click over that you get caught? Is it 16 over? What is it? So I think that's part of the argument, that people are frustrated with the fact that there's not a quantifiable amount that we know of. And then also there's no human element with which maybe we can bat our eyes and request to have a pardon.
The truth of the matter is, I'm not a big fan of these cameras, but who are you to say what's wrong? Like if you're saying speeding is supposed to be anything over the speed limit, right? Like 50 kilometers an hour is what the speed is, or 40, depending on where you are in town.
But we're all really good at justifying our own behavior and blaming and vilifying other people's behavior.
That's a deeper conversation. That's not just speeding. That's Zayers.
Okay, so the council is working really, really hard to try to deal with the issues that we have on hand. One of the big takeaways that I had from this interview is that 311 number. I didn't know anything about it before. And I think if there is an issue that I'd love to have some chat time with the councillor about, or that I feel strongly about, I'm going to call that number.
You and I have talked about council and running for council and stuff like that. That's a no-brainer. We're not doing that.
Oh, goodness, no. No.
So anybody who's willing to step up and serve the community like that, like, they have my utmost respect. Like, not only just because of the fact that you stuck your neck out there, but Bruce is saying that he doesn't have to answer the phone that much, but there are still people that he's got to deal with on a regular basis where I would think you'd have to question your life choices.
I think so. We interviewed Dave Barton, we interviewed Gary Lynn O'Connor, and one of the things I personally keep coming back to is just reminding our listeners and our community, go and make a difference. If you have a strong feeling, a strong position regarding an issue in town, in fact, in our province and our country, number one, you got to vote. Number two, stop complaining and go and put some action to your words, however that's going to be, whether that's going to a council meeting or whether it's writing an appropriate letter, or calling the 311. Get actively involved so that you can make a positive difference rather than just being judgmental.
And whether you are going to vote at the next election or whether you're going to the town council meeting, we should advise you, be careful when you're going through Goodwood. There's a speed camera there.
I think there's one at Quaker Village too, right?
I think there was, but I think it was knocked down. Power to the people. This has been a Camsel Broadcasting production. We're proud to be entering the 3rd year of doing this podcast, but we're even more proud that we can live in a town where we can have a conversation and talk about how pretty our mayor is.